Because Musselborough is sort of at the start of the peninsula, we're in quite a number of clusters. We were in an ICT cluster along between 2007 and 2009. And that's come and gone. We're also in a peninsular cluster which involves a lot of the children and the schools down the peninsula. And that was formed many, many years ago because the small schools were missing out on getting into town. So what they started to do was they had collegial kind of gymnastic festivals and music festivals so that, that the little schools could be involved. And so we're still very much part of that cluster. And then our main cluster that I'm involved with the most is our positive education cluster in South Dunedin. Now that started a long time ago. It started in 2006 and there were about 10 schools involved in that. And the reason that we started it was we had a lot of children who were very unwell emotionally and socially. Their well-being was really low. They came from challenging backgrounds, and those challenging behaviours were influenced in the classroom and in the playgrounds. And so there was a trial up in the Rotorua looking at circle time. The Rāti LBs ran it, and they had some really good results for children to actually become emotionally well and socially more interactive with their peers. And so at that time they had the EHAS funding. And so I wasn't principal at the time then, but it was I was chosen as a lead teacher for the circle time. So the cluster formed and we had professional development around circle time and put it into our schools. Jenny Mosley was the person from England who had come over and implemented the program in Rotorua, and she did a road tour around. I mean, it is a program and it does cost money and all those sorts of things, but the results were good. So Therese Hoyle was employed by this cluster. We also worked, the cluster also involved special education. Jenna Joe, he was instrumental in getting it set up as well. And we also worked with the Otago University in a research project that they were doing around children's wellbeing. So Therese came in, we contracted her for 3 years to implement this program across the 7 to 8 schools that were involved then. We had lead teachers, and I think this is something that you were talking about with how do we get good practice in schools. We had lead teachers identified within the schools. They had professional development with Therese quite a lot during the 3 years. And so we had, so 2 lead teachers from each school went to PD and then they implemented the program back in the school. She came in, and also at the same time there was a 0.5 teacher employed to support the program. And she was responsible for resourcing, she was responsible for making sure that the programs were in the schools. She came in and she gave feedback to teachers who were doing circle time. So there was a coordinator as well, and I think that's really vital for effective PD, is to actually have somebody, when you're doing across 7 to 9 schools, really effective to have one person doing it, because principals just haven't got the time to do it effectively anyway. And so what we all decided as a cluster was this was going to be our professional development for the next 3 years. So there were joint cluster meetings and teacher-only days at the beginning of every year, and still is. There were, like I said, the principals also attended the lead teacher professional development times so that they heard what the message was being told. There was staff meetings in which it was totally dedicated to the professional development. There was time in which the teachers could go and observe each other and to give some feedback, especially. And there was also time where the lead teachers went and modelled in the classrooms so that the new teachers to the program saw effective practice, and then they went back and gave feedback. So there was all that time involved in that. was the role of the principal to make sure that that happened. Over the 3 years, that program was implemented with great success, and there's wanting to find success. This was a report that was done from the principals around in about 2007 or 2009 it was, about how successful it was. What we saw with the children was that originally that they didn't have the language to be able to articulate how they were feeling, and they didn't have the ability to stop and think and problem solve. So what Circle Time does is gives them a voice, and it gives them an opportunity to, well, we used to give them sentence stems to help them articulate how they felt. And then as part of the Circle Time process, there was a forum where children could actually ask for help within themselves, and then the other children then helped problem solve. So it was really the kiddies teaching each other, really. What that professional development actually showed was that what it did was it promoted positive relationships and a school-wide caring and respectful ethos. And the kiddies and the teachers all had a common language which they all used, which was really important. It helped develop children's self-esteem and self-confidence, and it promoted the social and emotional development of all our children. But probably the main thing, and this is something else that is around effective professional development, was it was the very first time that teachers' own well-being had ever been addressed. Because as we know, if a teacher is well and happy, their children will be well and happy. And if teachers have got stress and strains and all that constant compliance stuff, we don't get really happy classrooms, and we need happy classrooms for children to be happy. The children did have a voice, they were able to articulate their feelings, and they were given strategies and opportunities to solve problems. And the reports, and one of the ones that was really interesting in our case was our neighbours started to notice a difference in the playground. Instead of the children being grumpy and telling each other some awful things, they heard happy laughing, and they heard nice comments, and they heard a language that we were promoting within our school as well.
And then that was being reflected in the other 7 schools? Or
Yes.
Did you start with your school?
No, all of them were doing it at the same time.
Yeah.
And so the lead teachers came together, so they networked with other lead teachers, which was really important. So they were meeting every term, sometimes twice a term in the early first couple of years. And so that was really effective, because if they had problems with Circle Time, they could nut them out. And so that collaboration across the staff was really important as well. And I think the collaboration between the principals, and the management team, they've got to walk the talk. And that's just what John was saying. You just have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to know that it's the right thing for the children. I had very positive responses from the parents, and it's taken 9 years. Like it doesn't happen overnight. We had newsletters going out. We had parent nights. We had a parent night to introduce Circle Time. And normally our parent nights, we'd get maybe 3 or 4 parents. We organised one Circle Time. That night we had, the hall was filled, and we had to devise 2 Circle Times, so we had to spread it out. And the parents saw it as a really positive way that we were, talking to our children as well. Yeah. So the parents embraced it. And I remember there was, because we were doing sort of things like habits of mind and all those sorts of things as well at the time, and I remember one parent coming home and saying, coming to school after their child had come home and saying, my brother just needs to manage his impulsivity. So, that kind of wonderful common language was being across the school and across the whole of the cluster. We were all finding the same things. So we saw changes in their attitude, we saw changes in engagement, we saw changes in all levels of achievement in reading, writing, and maths.
What about relationships with the teachers in terms of, like we were talking about teaching?
That changed too,
Did that free them up too? Absolutely,
and I think the next development that we went into after Circle Time was even more so, because at the end of 2009, we had a group of schools, the review was going on, so we had changes happened, schools closed, other schools merged, and so that was quite a It was very hard, and I think the circle time and the use of the relationships within the schools, it was helpful because most of the schools were involved one way or another with the mergers. The enabling conditions were that there was a common cause. We had dedicated, enthusiastic and committed principals. We had very creditable PD presenters that that they knew what they were doing and they could present. We had funding availability, we had the lead teacher model, and we had time to implement this initiative. And the teacher being employed across the cluster was also really useful, and we had whole school buy-in, because if you haven't got whole school buy-in, it's just not, it just doesn't work. What we learned was that collaboration was imperative within the school and between the schools, so that there was a common message going across all of the schools, that robust research supported our initiative, because a lot of it was all around positive education. And the need for effective practitioners. So choosing your lead teacher was imperative. It was really important to get the right person. That ongoing PD was absolutely essential, because we still, even though it's well and truly embedded in Musselborough School, we still do circle times, just have a practice circle time every now and then, and in a staff meeting we'll have a circle time, and we use circle time all the time as a tool. And the other thing is really important is time for reflection, evaluation and identifying our next steps. So into 2009 we finished our circle time contract. We all wanted to continue this way forward, and we went to Melbourne. We went over there and worked with Bert Van Halen and Maria Roberto from the Victoria University, and looked at how we could move circle time into a wider approach. So that's where we came to our positive education approach. And we visited schools over there looking at strengths-based programs, looking at children's strengths. And we used the characteristics from the Authentic Happiness, which is a big organisation around wellbeing. They've got 24 VIA strengths, which are values in action. And what we did is we came back and we got all the teachers to do the VIA strengths just to see where they sat. And this was a really interesting development for our teachers, because the first year that we were involved in this was all around teacher wellbeing rather than putting programs into place for children. And teachers knowing each other really well and knowing how they work, and seeing, as we know, sometimes staffs aren't always as collaborative as others, and getting to know all the strengths of the top strengths of the teachers was really valuable for me and for other people, because you could actually see, oh, right now I know how to work with this person. And it was really interesting it was a self-awareness journey for a lot of people. And one of my teachers realised that all her strengths were strengths of the head or strengths of action and no strengths of the heart. So she suddenly realised how that impacted in her classroom with the children. So it's been an interesting journey for a lot of us. We've also worked closely with Geelong Grammar. They've got an incredibly effective wellbeing program there. And we've also brought in people like Nathan Makari-Wallace around brain science, neuroscience, and how children's brains work and things. So teachers have got a really good understanding around what makes the well-being of a child. We've now brought all the positive education approach into our curriculum. So we have a positive ed overview and a rationale, and how we put it all together using the key competencies and the values and the learning areas. So we've got a really tight, I'm not saying tight, but flexible curriculum around it. How do we know it's making a difference? Well, the children are more settled. The playground is settled. the kids have got lots of things that they can do. We have modelling books and compliment books that we're seeing really positive well-being through. We've got reflections, especially the year 5 and 6s, they do a reflection every week. And in that reflection they have to identify a strength that they've used during the week, a value that they've used during the week, and something that they're going to work on the following week. So that's the way we're seeing things.